Why did Elizabeth Montgomery, a woman who once dared to speak out against all of Hollywood, choose silence in the face of her own death? A woman who had openly fought for women's rights, opposed war, and defended causes once labeled as dangerous, chose to leave this world without a word. No press conference, no public statement, no farewell. Only a gentle smile, and then silence. Afternoon light spilled across the small garden of her Beverly Hills home. Behind a half-open window, Elizabeth sat quietly, a cup of tea in her hand, her eyes distant. No one knew those were the final days of America's witch, the woman who had once enchanted the world with a single twitch of her nose in Bewitched. Some say she feared pity. Others believe she simply wanted to choose the moment of her departure, like one last act of magic. From Samantha in Bewitched, the loving, whimsical wife who made America believe in magic, to Elizabeth in real life, the woman who dared to live, to love, and ultimately to leave on her own terms. This is not just a story about death, but a journey to reclaim the right to silence, in a world that never stopped demanding her smile. If you love true stories intertwined with whispers no one else dares to tell, subscribe and join us as we uncover the hidden secrets of Hollywood that never truly rest. Beverly Hills, April 1995. In a room filled with candlelight and soft laughter, Elizabeth Montgomery entered, elegant, radiant, untouched by time. Her golden hair fell gently over her shoulders, her blue eyes shimmering with quiet joy. She raised her glass to her friends, shared old stories, and smiled. That same smile that once made America believe that even witches could be kind, gentle, and full of magic. No one knew it would be the last public appearance of her life. Just a few weeks later, her name would cover every newspaper. Not for a new role, but for the news that she was gone forever, at the age of 62. Some say that even that night, she was already weak. When a friend asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Elizabeth simply smiled and said, "I'm just a little tired. Don't worry." Many believe she already knew about her illness but chose silence. Perhaps she understood that if she spoke out, pity would destroy what she cherished most, her dignity. And so, beneath the lights and the music, she kept smiling, serene, graceful, as if performing the final role of her life. But this time, there were no cameras, no scripts, only truth and silence. What do you think about this? And let us know in the comments. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on the stories hidden behind the brightest lights of Hollywood in early 1995. Under the soft California sun, Elizabeth Montgomery went to the hospital for a routine checkup. No one could have imagined that this brief visit would open the final chapter of her life. The results came back. Colon cancer, terminal stage. The disease had progressed so rapidly that even the most optimistic doctors couldn't offer hope. They urged her to be hospitalized immediately, but Elizabeth simply shook her head and said she needed a little time to get things in order. Then she walked out of the hospital, her back straight, her smile as gentle as ever. From that moment on, no one but her partner, Robert Foxworth, knew that she was fighting the illness that would soon take her life. Some say Elizabeth had known long before that day, but chose to keep it to herself. A close friend once said, "She knew more than people thought. She just didn't want anyone to see her weak." Perhaps for Elizabeth, silence was the last way to preserve control, something she had fought for all her life. From Hollywood, from the media, and sometimes from the people she loved. Just like when she played Samantha in Bewitched, Elizabeth understood that real magic wasn't about disappearing from the world. It was about choosing how to leave it. From 1964 to 1972, Elizabeth Montgomery embodied the American dream. Graceful, beautiful, intelligent, and always capable of making everything seem a little brighter. Every evening, millions of American families gathered around their black and white televisions to watch Bewitched and the radiant smile of Samantha Stevens, the charming witch who could make the world spin with a simple twitch of her nose. The show became a cultural phenomenon, breaking television records of its time. 6 seasons, 5 Emmy nominations, and hundreds of fan letters arriving each day. People didn't just love Samantha for her sweetness and wit. They loved her because she represented what America longed for: a happy family, a perfect wife, and a world where magic still existed. But behind the laughter and the lights, Elizabeth began to feel lost. When the cameras stopped rolling, she didn't rush back to her dressing room. She would often stand quietly in the studio hallway, staring into the distance through the haze of cigarette smoke and fading lights. A crew member once recalled, after every laughing scene, she would step outside and stand alone for a long time. She wouldn't speak or look at anyone. She just breathed slowly, as if trying to find herself again, beneath the makeup and the glare. Some said the smile that America adored had become her perfect mask. A performance stretched so long that she no longer knew where Samantha ended and Elizabeth began. The more famous she became, the further she drifted from herself. People loved Samantha, the patient wife who smiled through everything. But Elizabeth, the real woman behind the role, grew weary of the pretense. She began to wonder, if I'm not Samantha tomorrow, will anyone still remember me? And so, every time that magical nose twitch appeared on screen, millions laughed with joy, while the woman who created that magic felt a quiet emptiness spreading inside her, as if each smile on camera took away one more piece of who she truly was. On screen, Elizabeth Montgomery was the embodiment of gentleness, the petite wife who could turn every problem into a touch of magic. But off-screen, she was a force that moved against the wind of her time. When Hollywood hesitated to speak about gender equality, she raised her voice. When television preferred its women smiling and silent, she chose to challenge that image. During the 1960s, Elizabeth openly supported abortion rights, women's rights, and the LGBTQ+ community, while also speaking out against the Vietnam War. She signed peace petitions, appeared in charity events, and donated to human rights organizations. A television star who dared to stand up for her beliefs. Rare, then, and considered dangerous. Rumors spread that after those public stances, Elizabeth was quietly blacklisted by several major television networks. One executive reportedly said, "She's too smart, too independent, and that scares men." Some believe those years of quiet isolation taught her the art of silence, how to conceal her deepest thoughts behind a calm smile. And when illness came, that instinct returned. No confessions, no pleas, no complaints. Because for Elizabeth, keeping her secret wasn't weakness. It was her final act of control. In a world that had always tried to define her by her smile, silence was the only freedom she had left. In a world where every secret had a price, Elizabeth Montgomery managed to keep the most precious thing of all, her silence. After decades under the spotlight, she chose to retreat to a small house in Beverly Hills, a quiet haven surrounded by lavender blossoms and watched over by an aging dog that always lay by her feet. Beside her was Robert Foxworth, a man without noise, without vanity, who loved her with quiet patience. For 20 years, they didn't need papers or ceremonies. Only when time was running out did they decide to sign their names, a gentle affirmation that this was the person she had chosen to stay until the end. Many wondered why Robert was the only one who knew she was sick. Some say Elizabeth told him, "Don't tell anyone. I don't want to become a headline." And he kept that promise. Absolutely. For months, only the two of them knew that time was slipping away faster each day. Robert cared for her with extraordinary tenderness. No tears, no drama. Just love, silence, and the tightening of hands as the afternoon light faded. Perhaps, in a world where everything could be recorded and exposed, Elizabeth had finally found one person willing to keep her secret, all the way to the very end. On the morning of May 18, 1995, Hollywood woke to a shock unlike any it had felt before. Among the usual morning chatter of new movie releases and red carpet premieres, one short line appeared, brief, almost unnoticeable, yet powerful enough to make the entire entertainment world fall silent. Elizabeth Montgomery, star of Bewitched, has died at the age of 62. No warning, no final photos, no last interviews about illness or pain, just a stark, sudden announcement, as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. Her former co-stars, producers, and the old Bewitched crew were stunned. No one had known she was ill. No one knew that after her radiant smile at that April party, she had only a few weeks left to live. She departed quietly, so softly that it was as if she had simply stepped through another door, one where there were no cameras, no lights, only stillness. For more than 3 decades, the press had followed her every step, from film sets to award ceremonies, from the glory days of Bewitched to her later years of quiet life in Beverly Hills. And then, one day, Elizabeth disappeared from the public eye. No scandal, no retirement announcement, no farewell. A veteran journalist once said, "We followed her for years, but she slipped out of the lens as if she'd taken her magic with her." Some believe that was her intention, to leave before the lights dimmed, so the world would remember her at her brightest, not as a woman fading under illness. Perhaps, for Elizabeth Montgomery, that was her final performance. No script, no lines, no audience, no applause, only serenity. And in that quiet moment, she became what she had embodied all her life, a kind of magic. No longer Samantha, the nose-twitching witch who made America laugh, but Elizabeth, the woman behind the legend, stepping gracefully into eternity. And ever since that day, among the busy streets of Hollywood, people still say that whenever a black and white screen flickers on, whenever Samantha twitches her nose and makes the world smile again, somewhere out there, Elizabeth Montgomery is smiling too, from a light no one can ever touch. Behind the gentle smile that once captivated millions, Elizabeth Montgomery was a woman who cherished silence. While Hollywood chased after endless parties, flashing cameras, and conversations that never seemed to end, she preferred to go home early, brew a pot of tea, open a book, and quietly watch the sunlight spill through the window. To her close friends, she was calm, kind, and never said more than she needed to. She once said, "Silence isn't frightening. It only becomes frightening when you stop accepting yourself." A former housekeeper once shared that in her final years, Elizabeth often spoke softly to herself while tending to the plants in her garden. "I'm fine. Everything's fine," she would say. No one knew whether those words were meant to comfort herself, or if they were part of a quiet conversation with her late father, actor Robert Montgomery, the man who first led her into the world of cinema. Some believe that in those quiet afternoons, surrounded by sunlight and the faint scent of tea in the breeze, Elizabeth was reaching for the last bit of warmth from her childhood. Because sometimes the people who make the world smile the most are the ones most afraid of being alone, and who only find peace when no one is watching. Samantha Stevens, the nose-twitching witch who made America laugh, turned Elizabeth Montgomery into a cultural icon of the 1960s. During its 8-year run, Bewitched not only brought her to the peak of fame but also tied her name forever to the image of the perfect wife. Sweet, cheerful, graceful, and always knowing how to make everything just right. Yet behind every laugh was a sigh no one ever heard. The very role that made her immortal slowly took away her right to simply be herself. Elizabeth once said, "Hollywood wants me to be Samantha forever, but I wasn't born to be a smiling doll." A crew member from Bewitched once recalled that William Asher, her husband at the time and the show's director, always wanted her to maintain that perfect, lovable, never defiant image. Some believe that this dual confinement, both professional and personal, taught Elizabeth to hide her sadness and tuck away the cracks behind the spotlight. When the cameras stopped rolling, Samantha disappeared. But Elizabeth still had to smile. And perhaps, in that very smile, she realized a bitter truth. Not all magic brings happiness. Some spells, no matter how dazzling, are just golden cages, beautiful enough to make you forget that you're trapped inside. After the quiet funeral in Beverly Hills, Robert Foxworth returned to the home they had shared, a space still carrying the faint scent of lavender, Elizabeth's favorite. On her desk, among old books and faded photographs, he found a small brown leather notebook, its edges worn and soft from years of touch. Inside were only a few short lines, written in her elegant, slanted handwriting. "I have lived a full life. What I want most now is peace. No tears, no lament. Just a simple declaration. Yet it said everything." No one but Robert ever saw that notebook. He never released it publicly, nor allowed anyone to photograph it. Some say that in the final pages, Elizabeth had written a farewell addressed to those who misunderstood me. But when asked about it, Robert simply replied, "Some things are meant to stay with her." People say it was the final act of a woman who had been scrutinized all her life, keeping a piece of her soul untouched beyond Hollywood's reach. And perhaps, within those last quiet words, Elizabeth finally found what she had been searching for all along: peace, not in fame, but in stillness. On the afternoon of May 18, 1995, sunlight poured into the small house on the hills of Beverly Hills. There were no ambulances, no cameras, no noise from the press. Only Elizabeth Montgomery, lying on her old wooden bed, surrounded by her 3 children and Robert Foxworth, the man who had been by her side for 20 years. No medication, no tubes. She chose to leave this world in her own home, within the same walls that had witnessed countless summers, laughter, and quiet moments. The room was filled with the soft scent of lavender. The small clock on the nightstand ticked steadily, marking time. She opened her eyes one last time, her gentle gaze drifting toward the window, where the garden was in full bloom. A neighbor later recalled that, just before the sun went down, Elizabeth opened the window, looked out at the flowers and whispered, "It's beautiful today." That may have been her final words. No one knew whom she was speaking to. Life itself, her late father, or perhaps just herself. There was no tragic ending, no farewell speech, only a soft breath that dissolved into the breeze. And in that serene afternoon, Elizabeth Montgomery, the woman who once made the world believe in magic, finally became light herself. Elizabeth Montgomery, the woman who once made the whole world smile, chose to leave quietly, as softly as a breath. No flashbulbs, no cameras, no tearful goodbyes. Just a peaceful afternoon in her small house on the hills of Beverly Hills, where sunlight streamed through the curtains and the scent of lavender lingered in the air. She, who had spent her entire life in the spotlight, chose the gentle glow of twilight as her final farewell. No spectacle, no noise, only serenity, as complete and graceful as the words she once wrote in her final journal. "I have lived a full life. What I want most now is peace." Some say that when Robert Foxworth held her hand for the last time, he felt it strangely warm, as if the magic was still there. And perhaps Samantha never truly disappeared. Maybe she just twitched her nose one last time and became light itself. Perhaps that was Elizabeth Montgomery's greatest magic, turning death into something beautiful. A moment where silence spoke all the words she had ever lived for. What do you think made her choose silence? Fear of pity, or the wish to keep her last piece of freedom? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And maybe, like her, keep believing in a little bit of magic.